The first explosions caught everyone off guard, sending ripples of confusion through the auditorium. Professor Velkin, the Trotskian xenobiologist, froze mid-sentence as the emergency lights flickered on. Zachary Xavier gripped the edges of his desk, his military instincts kicking in before his conscious mind could process what was happening. "Remain calm." Professor Velkin's voice wavered, his normally blue scales shifting to a mottled purple pattern. "The university's security protocols are activating." Zachary knew better. 6 years in the Colonial Defense Force had taught him the difference between security protocols and genuine danger. This was the latter. The distant rumble of secondary explosions confirmed his suspicions. "Everyone down," Zachary shouted, dropping to the floor and pulling a nearby fluorection student with him. The slender, plant-based alien trembled against him as debris rained from the ceiling. The Interstellar Academy of Advanced Sciences prided itself on being the most prestigious multi-species educational institution in the Orion Arm. Today, that prestige made it a target. "What's happening?" whispered Grell, a Vesperian whose insect-like features were now rigid with fear. "Attack," Zachary replied, keeping his voice low. "Possibly terrorists, maybe separatists." Professor Velkin had managed to activate the emergency console. "Security reports multiple breaches in sectors 2 and 4. We are instructed to shelter in place." Zachary assessed the auditorium. 63 students from 17 species, one exit that led to the main hall, and reinforced windows designed to withstand the vacuum of space, not armed attackers. "Professor," Zachary called out, "that door won't hold if they're using military-grade weapons." The Trotskian professor's head crest flattened against a skull. "Mr. Xavier, I appreciate your military background, but please allow our security." The lights cut out completely. In the dim emergency lighting, Zachary could see the terror spreading across alien faces, manifesting in species-specific ways, some freezing, others huddling together, a few emitting warning pheromones that made the air thick and acrid. "We need to move," Zachary insisted, rising to a crouch. "There's a maintenance tunnel behind the lecture platform. It connects to the old wing." Professor Velkin's compound eyes widened. "How could you possibly know that?" "I memorize escape routes." "Old habit." Zachary moved toward the platform. "Everyone stay low and quiet. Follow me in groups of 5, starting with the smaller species." To his surprise, the aliens complied without question. Fear had a way of establishing chain of command faster than any formal declaration. The first group made it through the hidden panel Zachary pried open. The second group was halfway across the platform when the auditorium doors exploded inward. 3 armored figures stormed in, weapons raised. Their armor bore no insignia, but Zachary recognized the stance, the coordination. Former military, possibly mercenaries. "Down," Zachary yelled, grabbing a heavy display case and hurling it toward the intruders. It shattered against the lead attacker, buying precious seconds. "Get them through," he ordered Professor Velkin, who was shepherding students into the tunnel with newfound urgency. The attackers recovered quickly. One fired a burst that chewed through the platform mere inches from Zachary's position. He rolled and came up behind the lectern, searching for anything useful. His hand closed around a laser pointer used for presentations. Not a weapon, but a tool. He clicked it on and aimed the beam directly at the lead attacker's visor sensors. The momentary blindness was enough for Zachary to close the distance. Years of combat training took over. He disarmed the first attacker with a precise strike to the wrist, pivoted to avoid fire from the second, and used the captured weapon to disable both remaining threats with non-lethal shots to their armor joints. "Last group, move now," he commanded, backing toward the tunnel while keeping his weapon trained on the doorway. Professor Velkin stared at him from the tunnel entrance, his scales now an ashen gray. "Mr. Xavier, that was just getting started," Zachary replied grimly. "Those were scouts. More will come." "How many students made it through?" All but 4 who were trapped on the far side when the attack began. Zachary nodded. Seal this entrance once I'm through. The tunnel should lead to the botanical laboratories if the schematics I studied are current. The professor's head tilted. You studied the Academy's structural schematics? Why would a xenobiology student do that? The same reason I sit with my back to the wall and memorize every exit, Zachary replied, slipping into the tunnel. Because war taught me that preparation isn't paranoia, it's survival. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and poorly lit, forcing the taller species to hunch uncomfortably. Zachary took point, while Professor Velkin brought up the rear, his natural bioluminescence providing additional light. Stay close, stay quiet, Zachary whispered back to the group. Professor, what's the Academy's protocol for this situation? The Traxian's voice was tight with stress. Lockdown, emergency beacons, security response teams. But if they've disabled communications. They have, Zachary confirmed. The attack pattern is classic. Hit communications first, then create confusion with multiple breaches. They're well organized. A Meridian student, her crystalline structure vibrating with anxiety, spoke up. But why attack an academic institution? We're students, not combatants. Information, Zachary replied without slowing. The Academy houses some of the most advanced research in the sector. Or hostages, many of you are children of diplomats or corporate leaders. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Zachary paused, orienting himself. The botanical labs should be to the right, but that would take us closer to the reported breaches. He pointed left. This way should lead to the aquatic studies wing. It's farther from the center of the attack and has direct access to the emergency shuttles. Professor Velkin's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. Mr. Xavier, your knowledge is unexpected for a first-year student. I'll explain later, Zachary promised, already moving down the left passage. Right now, focus on keeping everyone together and quiet. They had covered perhaps 200 meters when a distant explosion shook the tunnel, sending dust and debris raining down. Several students cried out in alarm. Steady, Zachary urged. That was controlled their breaching internal walls. A Kelvexi student, whose gelatinous body quivered with each vibration, gurgled something in its native tongue. The translation implant in Zachary's ear rendered it as, "What do they want with us?" "Not you specifically," Zachary replied. "But chaos creates opportunities. If they can hold the Academy, they can demand anything: research data, ransoms, political concessions." They reached a sealed hatch at the end of the tunnel. Zachary examined the locking mechanism and frowned. It's electronic. If they've compromised the systems, they might be able to track any access attempts. Professor Velkin pushed forward. My faculty override might work without triggering alerts. He pressed his scaled hand against the biometric scanner, but nothing happened. The backup systems must be offline too. Zachary considered their options. We need to get through without using the electronic systems. He turned to the group. Does anyone have acidic secretions or enhanced strength abilities? Several students exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, a Dervorian stepped forward, her rocky exoskeleton grinding softly as she moved. I can break through, she said, her voice like gravel shifting. My species evolved to tunnel through mineral deposits. Good, Zachary nodded. Work on the hinges, not the lock itself. Less noise that way. As the Dervorian began methodically attacking the metal hinges with her diamond-hard limbs, Zachary addressed the group. Once we're through, we'll be in occupied territory. Stay low, move fast, and follow my lead. If we get separated, head for the aquatic wing and barricade yourselves in. The water tanks provide good cover, and the reinforced walls were designed to contain pressure. Professor Velkin's head crest rose slightly. You speak as if you've done this before, Mr. Xavier. Zachary checked the captured weapons charge. Kundari 7, Epsilon Ridge, New Calcutta. Different places, same situation, civilians caught in combat zones. The Dervorian had made significant progress on the first hinge. Small metal fragments littered the floor beneath her working limbs. In all those places, the professor continued, what were the survival rates for civilians? Zachary met the alien's compound eyes. Higher when they had someone who knew what they were doing. The honesty seemed to satisfy the professor, who nodded gravely. The first hinge gave way with a muffled snap. The Dervorian immediately shifted her attention to the second one, working faster now that she had found the weak points in the metal. Almost through, she reported. Zachary positioned himself to be first through the opening. Remember, quick and quiet. The aquatic wing should be 2 levels up and 3 sections east from here. The second hinge broke, and the heavy hatch sagged. With careful coordination, Zachary and the Dervorian eased it open just enough for everyone to slip through one at a time. They emerged into a dimly lit maintenance corridor. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Zachary listened carefully for any sounds of pursuit or combat. Clear for now, he whispered. Professor, stay in the middle of the group. I need your authority if we encounter any security or faculty. They moved as quietly as such a diverse group could manage. Some species were naturally silent, while others had to consciously control appendages that clicked or scraped against the floor. They had almost reached the end of the corridor when Zachary raised his hand, signaling an immediate halt. Everyone froze. Voices echoed from around the corner, harsh, clipped words in a language Zachary recognized immediately. Centurion mercenary dialect, a brutal pidgin used by the most notorious guns for hire in the sector. Zachary turned to the group and signaled for absolute silence. He crept forward alone, pressing his back against the wall as he edged toward the corner. 2 mercenaries stood guard at an intersection 20 meters ahead. Their armor matched those he'd encountered in the auditorium, but these carried heavier weapons, Taurian disruptors capable of reducing organic matter to its component molecules. Zachary retreated to the group. 2 guards blocking our path, he whispered. Heavily armed. We need a diversion. A Halection student raised a tentacle. I can create an electromagnetic pulse. Short range, but it might disable their comms temporarily. Zachary nodded. Do it on my signal. Professor, once their comms are down, I need you to take everyone down the right corridor. There should be a service elevator that can take you up to the aquatic level. What about you? Professor Velkin asked. I'll deal with the guards, then catch up. Zachary's expression hardened. If I'm not there in 5 minutes, don't wait. Before anyone could object, Zachary positioned himself at the corner, weapon ready. He nodded to the Halection, who extended all 8 tentacles, the tips beginning to glow with accumulated energy. Now, Zachary whispered. The Halection released the pulse. A wave of invisible energy washed over the corridor. The mercenaries' armor systems flickered momentarily as their communications and some auxiliary functions failed. Zachary moved with practiced precision. 3 quick shots, 1 to distract, 2 to incapacitate. Both guards went down before they could return fire effectively. Go, he hissed back to the group, who rushed past him toward the right corridor as he covered their retreat. Professor Velkin paused briefly. We will wait precisely 5 minutes, Mr. Xavier. Zachary secured the mercenaries' weapons and checked their armor for anything useful. A security keycard, emergency rations, and most importantly, a communication device that might provide intelligence on their operation. He jogged to catch up with the group, finding them huddled around the service elevator. The Halection was attempting to bypass the security lockout. Any luck? Zachary asked. Almost, the Halection replied, tentacles working deftly across the control panel. Their override protocols are sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough for someone with 14 manipulating appendages. The elevator panel suddenly lit up green. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Everyone in, Zachary ordered. Quick and orderly. They crowded into the elevator, which groaned under the combined weight of so many diverse life forms. The Dervorian alone weighed as much as 4 humans. As the doors closed, a burst of weapons fire struck the exterior panel, sending sparks flying. The elevator lurched and began its ascent, but Zachary knew their position was now compromised. "They know where we are," he said grimly. "Once we reach the aquatic level, we'll need to move fast. The shuttle bay is on the far side of the wing." Professor Velkin's scales had darkened to a deep indigo. "Mr. Xavier, I believe it's time you told us who you really are." All eyes turned to Zachary. The elevator continued its agonizingly slow climb. "Zachary Xavier, formerly Captain, Colonial Defense Force Special Operations," he admitted. "Currently on educational leave to complete xenobiology studies as part of the Military Science Exchange Program." A murmur ran through the group. The exchange program was well known but highly selective. Only the most promising officers were given the opportunity to study at civilian institutions, bringing their expertise back to the military. "So, you're not just a student," the professor stated. "I am a student," Zachary insisted. "But I'm also trained for exactly this kind of situation." The elevator shuddered to a halt. The display indicated they had reached the aquatic level, but the doors remained closed. "They've overridden the controls," the Halection said, tentacles working frantically on the panel. "I can't bypass it this time." Zachary examined the ceiling of the elevator. There should be an emergency hatch. Standard safety regulations require one in all vertical transport systems. He located the panel and pushed against it. It didn't budge. "Help me," he said to the Dervorian, who immediately understood. She extended her rocky limbs, and together they forced the hatch open. Zachary pulled himself up through the opening and surveyed their situation. They were between floors, with about a meter of space between the top of the elevator and the next level's doors. "I can force these doors," he called down. "Everyone be ready to climb out quickly." Using the captured weapon as a lever, Zachary gradually forced the doors apart, creating a gap wide enough for even the larger species to squeeze through. "Hurry," he urged, reaching down to help pull students up. "They'll have detected the elevator stoppage." One by one, the students climbed through. Professor Velkin was the last, his scales now a stressed yellow-orange as Zachary hauled him through the gap. They found themselves in a service corridor adjacent to the main aquatic studies area. Through reinforced glass walls, they could see enormous tanks filled with various water types, each hosting different aquatic ecosystems. The emergency shuttles are through the main research hall and past the specimen containment area, Professor Velkin said, his composure returning now that they were making progress. Zachary checked the corridor in both directions. "No signs of the attackers yet, but they'll figure out where we exited soon enough." He gestured for everyone to follow. "Stay close to the walls, away from the windows. Less chance of being spotted." They moved as quickly as caution allowed, passing tank after tank of exotic water-dwelling species. Under normal circumstances, Zachary would have been fascinated by the diversity of life forms. Now he was calculating distances, assessing cover, planning contingencies. They had almost reached the main research hall when a loud alarm began blaring throughout the facility. "General evacuation order," Professor Velkin translated, his head crest rising in surprise. "That means security must have regained control of some systems." "Or it's a trap," Zachary countered. "Driving everyone to evacuation points makes for easy capture." The professor's compound eyes blinked rapidly. "What do you suggest?" "We continue to the shuttles, but carefully. If security has regained control, we'll find allies. If not, we stay alert for ambush." They entered the main research hall, a vast space dominated by a central pool that served as a natural meeting point between various aquatic environments. Currently, it was deserted, the usual bustle of researchers and students absent. "Something's wrong," Zachary said, scanning the room. "There should be others responding to the evacuation order." A soft click from above caught his attention. Zachary looked up to see targeting lasers sweeping the floor. Automated security systems activated. Down, he shouted, pulling the nearest students to the floor as suppression fire strafed the position where they had been standing. The systems have been compromised, Professor Velkin realized, his voice tight with fear. They're using our own security against us. Zachary assessed their options. The security systems were designed to incapacitate, not kill, but that would be enough for the attackers to capture them. The pool, he decided quickly. Some of you can breathe underwater, yes? Several students nodded, including a Nexilian whose gills fluttered anxiously at his neck.
Good.
Those who can get into the water and stay down. The sensors are calibrated for air, not water. The rest of us will use the maintenance walkways beneath the observation deck. They should be below the targeting zone. The plan worked. The aquatic-capable students slipped into the central pool, while Zachary led the others along narrow walkways that circled beneath the main deck. The security systems continued to sweep the main floor but couldn't detect them in their new positions. They regrouped at the far side of the research hall, near the entrance to specimen containment. The shuttle bay is just beyond this section, Professor Velkin confirmed, dripping water from his semi-aquatic scales. But the containment area houses dangerous species. If the security systems are compromised, the specimens might be released, Zachary finished grimly. We'll need to move carefully. Any suggestions for dealing with aquatic predators, Professor? The Trosian considered for a moment. Most are sensitive to electrical currents. If we could generate a strong enough pulse. Like this? The Halection student extended his tentacles again. I can produce another electromagnetic discharge, but it will be my last for several hours. The energy requirements are substantial. Zachary nodded. Save it until we need it. Let's see what we're dealing with first. They approached the specimen containment area cautiously. Through the transparent doors, they could see that several tanks had indeed been breached. Water pooled on the floor, and various aquatic creatures flopped or slithered through the shallow depths. Most are harmless out of water, Professor Velkin noted with relief. Except. His voice trailed off as his compound eyes fixed on something moving in the shadows. Zachary followed his gaze. A sinuous, eel-like creature at least 3 meters long was gliding through the water on the floor, its skin glistening with a bioluminescent pattern that pulsed hypnotically. Abyssal mesmerlurk, the professor whispered. Extremely dangerous. Its light patterns can induce a trance state, making prey helpless before it strikes. Zachary turned to the group. Everyone shield your eyes when we go through. Direct exposure to the light pattern is what triggers the hypnotic effect, correct? The professor nodded. Yes, but how will we navigate if we can't look? The Dervorian, Zachary replied. Your species evolved in dark tunnels. Are your eyes less susceptible to light-based manipulation? The rock-like alien grated her limbs together, the equivalent of a nod. I see primarily through vibration detection. Visual light is secondary to my sensory input. Perfect. You'll guide us through. Everyone else will form a chain, hands on shoulders, eyes shielded or closed. Zachary turned to the Halection. Be ready with that electromagnetic pulse if the creature approaches too closely. They organized quickly, with the Dervorian at the front and Zachary taking the rear position to watch for pursuers. With a deep breath, they pushed through the doors into the containment area. The mesmerlurk detected them immediately. Its light pattern intensified, pulsing in complex sequences designed to ensnare the mind. Even with his eyes partially shielded, Zachary could feel the pull of the pattern, a gentle tugging at the edges of his consciousness. Keep moving, he urged as the group progressed slowly through the water-slicked floor. Other escaped specimens darted away from their approach, but the mesmerlurk began to circle, drawing closer with each pass. It's hunting us, the Dervorian reported, her voice vibrating with tension. Approaching from the left. Halection, stand by, Zachary ordered. Everyone else, pick up the pace. We're almost through. They were 5 meters from the exit when the Mesmerlurk made its move, lunging toward the middle of their line where a Photurian student glowed with natural light, an irresistible target for the predator.
Now!
Zachary shouted. The Helection released its electromagnetic pulse. The energy wave rippled outward, striking the Mesmerlurk mid-lunge. The creature convulsed violently, its bioluminescent pattern shorting out in irregular flashes before it collapsed to the floor, temporarily paralyzed. Run, Zachary urged, and the group broke formation, dashing for the exit. They burst through into a short corridor that led directly to the shuttle bay. Through the large viewing windows, they could see several emergency evacuation shuttles still docked. We made it, Professor Velkin breathed, his scales lightening with relief. Zachary wasn't ready to celebrate. Too easy, he muttered, studying the apparently empty shuttle bay. They would have secured the evacuation points first. As if to confirm his suspicion, movement caught his eye, armored figures positioning themselves behind maintenance vehicles and cargo containers. Ambush, he warned. They're waiting for us to enter the bay. The professor's scales darkened again. What do? We can't go back. Zachary studied the layout of the bay, counting enemies, noting positions, evaluating angles. 7 attackers that I can see. Probably more out of sight. They're expecting us to come through the main doors. He turned to the group. Is there another way into the bay? Maintenance access, emergency routes. A Vesperian student raised a segmented limb. The environmental control room. It connects to the bay through the life support system's access tunnels. I worked there last semester. Show me, Zachary said immediately. The Vesperian led them to a small door halfway down the corridor. It opened into a cramped room filled with monitoring equipment and control panels. The access tunnel is behind that panel, the Vesperian indicated, pointing to a section of the wall marked with technical warnings. Zachary helped remove the panel, revealing a narrow tunnel just large enough for most of them to crawl through. This leads directly to the shuttle bay. To the maintenance pit beneath the primary shuttle platform, the Vesperian confirmed. There are access ladders that lead up to the main floor. Perfect. Zachary turned to the group. This gives us a chance to outflank them. I'll go first, then the professor. Everyone else follow in single file. The larger species may need to remove exterior appendages or compress themselves. The Dervorian looked doubtful. I cannot fit through such a space. Zachary considered the problem. You'll have to use the main entrance, but wait for my signal. When you hear weapons fire, that's when you make your move. Head straight for the nearest shuttle and use your natural armor to shield the others as they board. The rocky alien grated her limbs in agreement. I will protect them. Zachary checked the captured weapon one last time. Everyone clear on the plan? We move quickly, we stay together, and we get to the nearest operational shuttle. Nods and various species, specific gestures of agreement followed. Let's go, Zachary said, ducking into the access tunnel. The passage was tight and poorly lit, forcing them to feel their way forward in many sections. Occasionally, they would pass beneath grates that allowed dim light from the bay above to filter down. Through these, Zachary could glimpse the mercenaries still in position, weapons trained on the main entrance. They reached the maintenance pit without detection. True to the Vesperian's word, access ladders led up to the bay floor at various points. Zachary selected one that would put them behind a large cargo loader, providing immediate cover. I'll go up first, he whispered to the group. When I signal, the professor follows, then everyone else. Head directly for Shuttle 3, it's closest, and the boarding ramp is already down. Zachary climbed the ladder with practiced silence, pausing at the top to survey the situation. The mercenaries remained focused on the main entrance, unaware of the threat emerging behind them. He signaled for the others to begin climbing, then moved to a better position, taking aim at the nearest attacker. Timing would be crucial. As the last student emerged from the pit, Zachary took his shot. The blast caught the first mercenary squarely between the shoulder blades, dropping him instantly. Before the others could react, Zachary fired twice more, creating chaos in their ranks. "Now," he shouted, both to his group and to the Dervorian waiting at the main entrance. The rocky alien burst through the doors, drawing immediate fire that ricocheted harmlessly off her mineral exoskeleton. The distraction allowed Zachary's group to make a dash for the designated shuttle. Professor Velkin reached it first, slapping his faculty override on the access panel. The shuttle systems hummed to life, emergency protocols bypassing the normal launch restrictions. "Get aboard," Zachary shouted, providing covering fire as the students rushed up the ramp. The mercenaries had recovered from their initial surprise and were now coordinating their response, attempting to flank the shuttle. The Dervorian had almost reached them when a concentrated burst of energy struck her lower limbs, cracking her rocky surface. She stumbled but continued forward with determination. Zachary laid down suppressive fire, buying precious seconds as the injured Dervorian climbed the ramp. He was the last to board, backing up the ramp as he continued firing. "Seal it," he yelled as soon as he cleared the threshold. Professor Velkin slammed the emergency closure control. The ramp retracted and the hatch sealed with a pneumatic hiss. "Launch sequence initiated," announced the shuttle's automated system. "Please secure yourselves for emergency departure." The students scrambled to find seats and restraints as the shuttle's engines powered up. Through the viewports, they could see mercenaries rushing the vessel, attempting to disable it before launch. "They're trying to override the launch controls," the Halection reported, his depleted tentacles still working across a systems panel. "I'm blocking their attempts, but they're persistent." The shuttle shuddered as something heavy struck its hull. "Magnetic clamps," Zachary realized. "They're trying to lock us down." Professor Velkin's scales paled. "Can we break free?" "Not with standard protocols," Zachary replied, moving to the pilot station. "But emergency shuttles have manual override capabilities." He studied the controls for a moment, then began entering commands. "Everyone brace yourselves. This will be rough." He bypassed the standard launch sequence and activated the emergency thrusters, directly a dangerous maneuver that risked structural damage to both the shuttle and the bay. The shuttle lurched violently as the thrusters fired at full power. The magnetic clamp strained and then sheared away, unable to withstand the sudden force. The shuttle shot forward, scraping against the bay doors that were only partially open. Alarms blared as the hull integrity was compromised in several sections, but the automated systems quickly deployed emergency sealants. They were clear of the Academy, accelerating away from the conflict zone. "Hull breach contained," the system announced. "Life support stable. Autopilot engaged. Course set for nearest Colonial Defense Force outpost." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the cabin. Students who had been rigid with terror began to relax, though the tension was far from gone. Zachary remained at the controls, making minor adjustments and monitoring for pursuit. "We're not safe yet," he cautioned. "They might have ships of their own." Professor Velkin joined him at the pilot station, his scales gradually returning to their normal blue. "Mr. Xavier, or should I say Captain, you saved all our lives today." Zachary shook his head. "We all did our part. Your students showed remarkable courage and adaptability." "Because you led us," the professor insisted. "You knew exactly what to do in a crisis that would have paralyzed most civilians." Zachary looked out at the stars now visible through the viewport, his expression distant. "Experience is a harsh teacher, Professor. What I know came at a high cost." "The wars you mentioned?" Zachary nodded. "Kundari 7 was the worst. We were supposed to be peacekeepers, but walked into a civil war. The locals had been fighting for generations, and we were just new targets to them. I learned quickly that textbook tactics don't survive contact with reality." The professor's compound eyes studied him carefully. "Is that why you chose to study xenobiology? To understand other species better than your military training allowed?" "Partly," Zachary admitted. The military taught me how different species fight. I wanted to learn how they live, how they think, what drives them beyond conflict. The shuttle's communication system suddenly activated. Emergency shuttle, this is Colonial Defense Vessel Intrepid. We've received your distress beacon and are moving to intercept. Please identify. Zachary activated the response channel. Intrepid, this is Captain Zachary Xavier, Military Science Exchange, ID code Alpha 97 Delta 2. We have evacuated approximately 60 civilians from Interstellar Academy during an armed assault. Request immediate assistance and medical support for injured. Confirmed, Captain Xavier. Maintain current course. Will rendezvous in 17 minutes. Intrepid out. Professor Velkin's head crest rose in surprise. They responded to your authority instantly. Military hierarchy, Zachary explained with a shrug. It has its uses in a crisis. The professor moved closer, lowering his voice. When we return to the academy after this crisis is resolved, I would be interested in discussing your experiences further. Perhaps in my course on comparative neurobiological responses to threat stimuli. Zachary raised an eyebrow. Your fear response class? I'm not sure my experiences would be relevant to an academic discussion. On the contrary, the professor insisted. You demonstrated something remarkable today, a human response to fear that differs significantly from most species I've studied. Where others froze or panicked, you became more focused, more effective. That's training, not nature, Zachary countered. Is it? The professor's scales rippled with academic interest. Or did your species evolve that response because of your unique evolutionary path? Most sentient species evolved to avoid predators. Evidence suggests humans evolved as persistent hunters, pursuing prey to exhaustion. Your fear doesn't paralyze, it energizes. Zachary considered this. I never thought of it that way. In the military, we just called it combat clarity, the moment when everything slows down and becomes crystal clear. Precisely, Professor Velkin said excitedly. Would you consider sharing your war experiences with my class? As a case study in adaptive fear responses. Before Zachary could answer, the shuttle's sensors beeped urgently. Vessel approaching at high speed, the system announced. Weapons signature detected. They're not giving up, Zachary muttered, returning his attention to the controls. Everyone secure yourselves again. This isn't over. The pursuing craft was faster and better armed than their emergency shuttle. It closed the distance rapidly, weapons charging. Intrepid, this is Xavier. Zachary called over the emergency channel. We have hostile pursuit, weapons hot. Request immediate assistance. Captain Xavier, this is Intrepid. We're increasing speed to intercept. Hold course and prepare for emergency docking. We'll cover your approach. Zachary adjusted their trajectory slightly. Everyone stay calm. Help is coming. The pursuing craft fired its first volley. Zachary executed evasive maneuvers as best he could with a sluggish shuttle, but one blast caught their port engine, sending them into a spin. Engine failure. The system reported calmly. Stabilizers offline. Emergency power activated. Zachary fought with the controls, using maneuvering thrusters to arrest their spin. Professor, I need your help. There's a manual stabilization protocol in the emergency systems. Panel to your right. The Trosian moved quickly, following Zachary's instructions. Together, they managed to regain some control of the damaged shuttle. Through the viewport, they saw Salvation approaching the Colonial Defense Vessel Intrepid, a sleek military cruiser bristling with weapons. It positioned itself between the shuttle and the pursuing craft, its defensive systems activating. Captain Xavier, maintain your approach vector. Tractor systems are standing by to assist with docking. The pursuing craft fired again, but this time the shots were intercepted by the Intrepid's point defense systems. The military vessel returned fire, precise shots disabling the attacker's weapons and engines. We're going to make it, Professor Velkin said, his scales shifting to a relieved cyan. Zachary nodded, guiding their damaged shuttle toward the Intrepid's open docking bay. Yes, we are. As the tractor beam took hold, gently pulling them to safety, Professor Velkin placed a scaled hand on Zachary's shoulder. My offer stands. When we return to classes, I would be honored if you would share your experiences with my students. Zachary watched as the Intrepid's bay doors closed behind them, sealing them in safety. The immediate danger was past, but the memories of countless other battles remained vivid in his mind. I'll think about it, Professor, he said finally. Some stories are harder to tell than others. 3 weeks later, the Interstellar Academy had largely returned to normal. The attackers, identified as a separatist faction attempting to acquire advanced research, had been apprehended. Security had been enhanced and classes had resumed. Professor Velkin's lecture hall was filled to capacity for his seminar on comparative neurobiological responses to threat stimuli. Students from all 17 species represented at the Academy waited with various expressions of anticipation. Today, the professor began, his scales a vibrant, enthusiastic blue. We have a unique opportunity to explore the practical applications of our theoretical models. Fear responses are not merely academic subjects, they are survival mechanisms shaped by millions of years of evolution. He gestured to Zachary, seated unobtrusively at the side of the lecture platform. Many of you know Captain Xavier from our recent ordeal. He has agreed to share his experiences with us to help us understand how different evolutionary paths create different responses to threat. Zachary stood and approached the lectern, scanning the room out of habit. He recognized many faces from the Escape the Dervorian, now recovered from her injuries, the Halection, whose tentacles had fully regenerated, the Vesperian, whose knowledge of the access tunnels had proven crucial. I'm not an academic, Zachary began simply. I'm a soldier who's seen too many conflicts across too many worlds. But Professor Velkin convinced me that my experiences might help you understand something important about how different species perceive and respond to danger. He paused, collecting his thoughts. 3 years ago, on a mining colony called New Calcutta, I was assigned to protect civilian evacuees during an insurrection. My unit was escorting 200 civilians through territory held by hostile forces. The room was completely silent, all attention focused on him. We were ambushed in a narrow canyon. The rebels had the high ground, superior numbers, and had cut off our retreat. By any tactical assessment, our situation was hopeless. Zachary's voice remained steady, but his eyes took on a distant quality. What happened next taught me more about interspecies psychology than any training manual ever could. The Meridian civilians with us immediately formed crystalline clusters, a defensive formation that protected the young. The Vesperian workers synchronized their movements, becoming effectively a single organism capable of rapid response. The Trosian administrators, like Professor Velkin, changed colors to blend with the surroundings, protecting those who couldn't hide themselves. He looked around the room, meeting various eyes, compound eyes, sensory clusters, and other perceptive organs. Each species responded according to their evolutionary programming. All valid, all effective in their own way. But what saved us that day was our ability to coordinate these different responses into a unified strategy. Professor Velkin's scales rippled with approval. This is precisely what makes multi-species cooperation so powerful, the diversity of approaches to problem-solving. Zachary nodded. Fear isn't the enemy. It's information. It's your body and mind telling you something important about your environment. What matters is what you do with that information. A Kelvexi student raised a gelatinous appendage. But how did you feel, Captain? As a human, what was your fear response? Zachary considered the question carefully. Humans are strange predators. We evolved to chase down prey that was faster than us by simply outlasting them. When I'm afraid, I don't freeze or flee, I become hyper-focused. Time seems to slow down. Details become clearer. Options present themselves. The predator's clarity, Professor Velkin interjected. A fascinating evolutionary adaptation. Maybe, Zachary acknowledged. But what I've learned through military service and now through my studies here is that no single response is superior. The Dervorians' natural armor, the Halexians' electrical discharge, the Vesperians' knowledge of the access tunnels all were crucial to our survival during the attack on the Academy. He stepped back from a lectern. I'm still learning to be a student again, to analyze rather than react. But if there's one thing I hope you take from my experiences, it's this. Understanding how different species respond to threats isn't just academic curiosity, it's the foundation of effective cooperation in a dangerous universe. Professor Velkin moved forward, his scales now a thoughtful purple. Thank you, Captain Xavier. Your practical experience adds a dimension to our theoretical models that no textbook could provide. As the class erupted in the various sounds of appreciation from human applause to Vesperian wing vibrations to meridian crystalline resonance, Zachary felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of turning painful memories into useful knowledge. Later, as students filed out of the lecture hall, Professor Velkin approached him. That was exceptional, Captain. You connected theory to reality in a way I never could. Zachary smiled slightly. Just sharing what I know, Professor. Though I admit, analyzing fear responses is easier than experiencing them. Perhaps that's the next evolution of sentient life, the professor suggested, his head crest rising thoughtfully. Not the elimination of fear, but its transformation into understanding. I drink to that, Zachary replied, looking out at the stars visible through the hall's high windows. A universe where we learn from each other's fears instead of exploiting them. The professor's scales shifted to a hopeful azure. With educators like you, Captain Xavier, we might just get there. Zachary wasn't sure about being an educator, but as he watched the diverse group of students discussing his lecture with animated interest, he felt certain of one thing. The next generation would face their fears with greater understanding than his had. And in the end, that might make all the difference.